Welcome back to Hannity. Breaking tonight, Judicial Watch has uncovered even more irregularities in the Clinton email probe. As a former State Department official testified under oath that he had major concerns about the fact that Hillary Clinton's team, quote, culled out 30,000 emails back in 2015 and didn't follow National Archives standards. More on this in a moment. But first, a bombshell story from The Hill's John Solomon. In an exclusive interview with The Hill, a Russian oligarch and former Manafort business client reveals that he was interviewed by the FBI in the fall of 2016 and cast doubt on the phony Russian collusion narrative. But check this out. According to Solomon, the FBI interview was never provided by Team Mueller, even though it provided potential proof of innocence. Joining me now for reaction is Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, The Hill's John Solomon, and Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton. John, I'll go to you first. This bombshell story, I tweeted it out before. I was reading through it. This is incredible. So we have a Russian oligarch with unquestionable ties to Putin. They were friends at one point. Oleg Deripaska, I don't think he runs from that, a metals magnate. His connections to Russia are not in question. He's interviewed by the FBI, according to your story. And in that interview by the FBI, he is asked about this potential collusion between members of the Trump team. And take it from there about his answer and then what was not provided to the team protecting Manafort, his legal team.
And it's really important to understand that in September 2016, Oleg Deripaska had some real credibility with the FBI because 6 years earlier, when Bob Mueller was the director of the FBI and Andrew McCabe was working Russian crime, they asked Oleg Deripaska to fund a secret mission to try to rescue a captured FBI agent who was hostage in Iran. So we go to a Russian, we ask him to spend his own money to rescue one of our own people. He gains a lot of credibility from that. So they show up at his house in September 2016 in the middle of the election. They say, listen, we think Paul Manafort, your former business associate, is coordinating with Russia to hijack this election. Donald Trump and Putin are working together. And he says, listen, I don't know for sure, but I can tell you, I think it's nonsense. The guy owes me money. The Russian government would come to me and ask me before they used them on such a sensitive operation. I think you're barking up the wrong tree. That is so significant from a discovery standpoint. And here's why. They go to the court 1 month later. This is in September, the interview. October, they go to the court, the FISA court. They don't tell the FISA court when they posit this theory that there's a collusion going on. They talked to one of their trusted Russian sources and he knocked it down. But even more significantly, Paul Manafort goes to trial. He's in the middle of this whole collusion and corruption question, and they don't provide that interview with the FBI to his legal defense team. That's known in the legal world as a Brady violation, and it could open up a new door of appeal or avenue of appeal for Paul Manafort's legal team.
Yeah, John, it's an incredible story. Everyone should check it out. Greg, going to you here from the legal side. We've seen this over and over with the Mueller team. Potential exculpatory information, whether it's the alleged tapes of Papadopoulos claiming he has nothing to do with the Russians, whether it's Konstantin Kilimnik, who is, of course, connected to Manafort, and they make it out to be this nefarious thing until we find out Kilimnik was a source for the Obama State Department, too. We see this again and again now with Deripaska indicating there was no collusion and it's kept away from Team Manafort and hidden in the Mueller little Al Capone's vault here.
You mentioned Brady violation. It's a Supreme Court decision, Brady versus Maryland, 1963. Prosecutors, like Mueller, must always turn over to the defense any exculpatory information. Failure to do so is a due process violation under the 5th and 14th Amendments. Now we learn through John's great reporting it wasn't. The Deripaska exculpatory evidence was never handed over to Manafort's team. So the remedy for that is to go to the judge and make a motion to set aside the verdict. You have to prove a nexus, so that will be the challenge for Manafort's lawyers. But, you know, it doesn't surprise me that it happened because the guy in charge of the Manafort case was Andrew Weissmann, who has a long and disgraceful history being caught threatening witnesses and suppressing evidence. He is a prosecutorial terrorist, and numerous complaints have been filed against him. And yet here's another example. When I read John's story out, it's got to be Andrew Weissmann. Has to be.
Yeah, this case has been a disgrace the way it's been handled. Tom, I'll go to you. I read your report tonight from Judicial Watch, another great piece of work. So we find out now that officials at the State Department sounded the alarm about these 30,000 emails that had been culled, like they were hunting off a herd or something like that. They eliminated these 30,000 emails. Why haven't we heard about this sooner? Why didn't this come out sooner? Where were the whistleblowers on this?
Well, because the same Justice Department and State Department that were targeting Trump, as we're discussing here, were protecting Hillary Clinton. And this senior official at the State Department was a senior records official. He saw that famous picture of Hillary Clinton looking at the BlackBerry. He raised questions about what's going on here. Does she have an email account? So he testified essentially that the State Department knew about her email system, didn't tell anyone about it. And then once they found out that she had all these email records, or finally admitted that she did, they allowed her to, on her own, go through and tell them what was government records and what wasn't, which was inappropriate. And it turns out they ended up destroying 33,000 records, including they tried to destroy classified information. And then thirdly, he says they underclassified material specifically on the Benghazi case. So that meant they were sending out the door material that was unmarked as classified, even though they knew it was classified, further putting national security at risk, not only to protect themselves, to protect Hillary, because they didn't want even more classified information associated with her account, obviously to protect her from being criminally prosecuted. Unbelievable scandal. More than enough information for the Justice Department to reopen an investigation into not only Hillary Clinton's misconduct, but frankly, Obama government official misconduct, certainly at the State Department.
John, Tom, Greg, thanks a lot. Also developing, the Washington Post is out with a new piece this week, casting doubt on claims from Congressman Devin Nunes and others about mysterious Maltese professor Joseph Mifsud having ties to Western intelligence. Remember, Mifsud was at the center of the case against George Papadopoulos. And while Jim Comey cast him as a Russian agent, Mueller's report makes no such claim. And questions about whether or not Mifsud has undisclosed ties to the West have yet to be answered. Here to respond to all of this is ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Republican Congressman Devin Nunes. Congressman Nunes, it's really great to talk to you. Your work on this case, I think when we look back on it, you'll be remembered for it. You've done some incredible work, and I deeply appreciate it. Having said that, the core of the conspiracy theory against Donald Trump has been that Joseph Mifsud had some ties to the Russian government, relayed information to Trump campaign member George Papadopoulos, and that set off this tide of the FBI investigatory trail. But Congressman, Bob Mueller, after millions of dollars, 500 search warrants, multiple FBI agents interviewing people, makes no such claim in his report. He says Mifsud has Russian connections. That's far different than him being a Russian agent. What are we missing here?
Well, Dan, there's always this saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. But in this case, there's not even smoke. There's not even any ashes. The fact that Joseph Mifsud, who was a Maltese diplomat before he was a professor, he's seen in pictures with people like Boris Johnson. He's leading talks at NATO. He's involved with many U.S. agencies, including the State Department and the FBI. And let's just top it off with this. In early 2017, as the House Intelligence Committee is beginning our investigation, just steps away from that investigation, Joseph Mifsud was, guess where? In the U.S. Capitol at the invitation of the State Department, or a group associated with the State Department. Members of Congress were there. So, look, the fact that Joseph Mifsud knows some Russians, yeah, I think that's very likely. The fact that Mueller ignores certain documents that he actually uses. He uses pieces of news stories in his, what I call the Mueller dossier, the Mueller report. And in those same news reports, Dan, you have evidence in the news report where they call him, these writers that they thought were good enough to use to make one point. They don't use the fact that those writers claim that he was a Western intelligence asset. So this whole Mifsud thing has stunk for a long time. It makes no sense. I have no idea whether or not if he's a Russian asset or a Western intelligence asset or a double agent or what. All I know is that after $40 million, we still don't know any more than we knew before. And this is supposedly the guy that knew about the Clinton emails.
And Congressman, one of the suspicious pieces I found in the Washington Post report is they emphasize at length Mifsud's efforts to cultivate relationships with Russians. Well, if he was a Russian asset, then why is he cultivating relations? I mean, do you understand how that doesn't make any sense? So on one hand, you're telling us Mifsud's the key figure in a Russian exchange of information with the Trump team to win an election. And on the other hand, in the Washington Post, you're reporting that he's still taking trips to Russia, trying to ingratiate himself to people. I mean, both of those stories can't be true at the same time.
Well, the other weird thing about this, too, Dan, is that you have the mainstream media who got this totally wrong. They were wrong about the hoax. You talk about it on your show all the time. You've written a book on it. The many people that you just had on just before us have talked about this. When are they just going to give it up? Like, these are Russian hoaxers. Like, what on earth is the Washington Post doing, jumping back into the Russia hoax water? And I think what they found is they look foolish again. Because, look, the only guy that we know that has said for sure that Mifsud is a Russian asset is, guess who? James Comey, just about a month ago, in the pages of the Washington Post. And so then the Washington Post decided, they have all of their supposed sources that they don't name. I mean, none of this makes any sense, but I don't understand why the mainstream media continues to jump into these waters. Why don't they actually try to go get the truth, right? They interview they interview a lady in the story that's at one time had affiliation. She's a UK citizen. Sambai or Samber, I think is the name. You probably know the name.
Yeah, sure. Arvinder Sambai.
Yeah, so why do you... So clearly she knows Mifsud, right? They interviewed her. Why not ask her point blank? You work with this guy. You've worked the State Department. You've worked with the FBI in the past. Who is this guy? Why would you not have a whole, 2 or 3 or 4 paragraphs just interviewing her? She could probably tell you a lot on Joseph Mifsud.
And Congressman, I just got
Mueller couldn't call him a Russian asset.
I just got a few seconds left, but I just want to get this one last question. And also, why isn't there some kind of damage assessment being done by the government if a Russian asset, Joseph Mifsud, he's been palling around with UK intelligence. He was in the United States in February of 2017. Where is the damage assessment at this point?
Well, that's been our major point the whole time. If Mifsud wasn't a Russian asset, my God, you've got the FBI, the State Department, the U.S. Congress, all of our allies, NATO, Boris Johnson. I mean, they've all been compromised by this Russian asset, famous Russian asset, Joseph Mifsud. So look, the fact that they're not doing a damage assessment, Dan, I think tells you and the American people all you need to know. Highly unlikely that Mifsud is a Russian asset.
Congressman, thanks so much for your work on this. It's really been incredible.